Honestly, half the time it feels like we are all floundering a bit in trying to just decide what direction we want to go in life. And trust me, that is not a feeling that is fun for anyone because it's usually covered by anxiety and this feeling of overwhelm because we want to have an answer for when someone asks us, "What are you going to do next?" or "What's your next move? What's your next job?" or the ever so dreaded question, "Hey, what's new with you?" Well, keeping everything simple, let's talk about resetting your life and how to move forward in a way that has a bit more meaning to you, as well as leaves room for a lot more fun and discovery. Let's jump right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple, actionable tips. And so, I'm gonna first say, yes, I am back. I made an update video or the update episode last week that I am back from my wedding, from my honeymoon, and my wife and I have gotten to spend the past 2.5 weeks just focusing on starting our marriage, starting our lives together. However, that also does mean that we are, in a new sense, resetting a lot of the parts of our lives that we have built up over the years because we are combining them together. And that takes a decent amount of work. And so, what ends up happening here is that we're now at a point where it's important that we consider how we reset our lives, combine them, and move forward. And that got me thinking because as we have both now returned to our 9 to 5 jobs, we're now thinking, how are we going to continue to kind of find the meaning that we want in the long term and for the future that we envision for ourselves as individuals and as a team and as a couple. So, that is what kind of got me thinking about this idea of how are we able to adjust, clarify, and make actionable steps towards a life that we find meaningful, but is still at its core simple. So we're gonna go through what I have kind of thought through and what that looks like. And I'm gonna steal a little bit from Cal Newport and his deep life stack and how that kind of has played out. And I'll show you guys what I mean by that. And also, I'm going to show you what I mean by I'm stealing a little bit more from him with we are going to have a drawing. So if you watch this on YouTube, if you listen to us on Spotify, go check us out on YouTube right now. We are currently using Paint 3D, so the new Paint, because why not? But the first piece of the puzzle here is what I call redefining because there's going to be multiple instances in your life that are going to get redefined either after a life event where that is good or negative that will redefine your life and that's something that you can't avoid. And then just when you go through seasons of change. So when you are going from say high school into college, you're going through a season of change. You're going through a transition from a quote unquote young adult. You might even be 17 when you graduate high school, so you're not even technically an adult. But then you go off to university and you are redefining your life because some people choose to go the extra mile and they really redefine who they are. And I've said this before, it's like maybe they get jacked over the summer, they pick up a couple extra books on self-confidence, personal development, and making friends, and then they go off to university and they have a grand old time. It happens. It's not uncommon. So if you're thinking about doing it, I encourage you to do it. But that is a point in which you are redefining your life. And that is a good thing because change is one of the few inevitable things that we can always count on. We just can't always know when it's coming. So what we're going to do here is let me pull up my lovely little 3D paint here, and we're going to have a little box. That's a very thick box. Let's turn that down a little bit. There we go. Five seems appropriate here. And so with this little box, this is redefining. With this one being redefining, I kind of situate this again as when you are going through a variety of changes, or when you are choosing to actively have a different type of relationship with your life. And so, as I said, there's any list of reasons this could happen. So it could be going to college, it could be moving states or countries, even if you are moving abroad. There can be other things like the loss of a family member, the loss of a relationship. So, loss of loved ones, or big life milestones in general. Maybe you got your first job, maybe you got your first big promotion, maybe you are buying a house and you are settling down. But if you're within my generation, that's less likely. So maybe you're getting your first apartment that you are renting on your own or with roommates, because roommates is also, I'd say, a bit more realistic, huh? We're moving on from that. But no, this is ultimately what it leads into, because when you reach these redefining moments, then you have a choice. You can try to continue along the same path. You can try to follow what's worked and give yourself, or try to avoid the change and give yourself kind of that time to be like, okay, I know things are different, but I don't quite know how I feel about it or what I want to do with that. And that's perfectly okay. But it's important that we do understand that eventually we do have to face to the fact that we are in a new spot. We are in a new chapter. We are starting a new chapter of life, and we have to take control of that, because if we don't, eventually someone else or something else will. And that's not the situation we want to have happen. But with redefining, we are using these milestones, using these events to really reconsider where we are right now and where we're going. Because if we are constantly adjusting along the way, then that works much better than just kind of Hail Marying into some life decision and then hoping for the best. You should have optimism, yes, but you shouldn't have blind optimism, which is where you just imagine and believe everything's going to work out the way you want it to. Because unfortunately, the reality is, as we have seen throughout our lives, that isn't how it plays out. But let's go back to here. Let me go. There we go. Now I'm even smaller on YouTube. All right. But as we go through redefining, then the next piece of the puzzle here is gaining clarity. So redefining. The next thing that stacks up is clarity. Now, with clarity, that is a decision. So redefining is life either is redefined for you, or you are trying to actively make that decision to redefine your life. And the way that I frame the second piece here is getting clarity is by when you make the active decision to embrace the redefinition that has occurred within your life, then you have to get clarity on where you want to go next. So consider redefining the catalyst and then getting clarity as the next move in planning. So I'm going to type out here So again, if you watch this on YouTube, you'll see as I'm working this out. But I kind of call it the next move in planning, because what you end up doing here is that you are trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to go from here? So this is where I'm stealing a bit more from Cal Newport, is finding that deep life and thinking about, what do I actually want to be doing in 5, 10, 15 years? What is the lifestyle I want to lead? And so he calls it lifestyle-centric planning as well. So kind of the deep life / lifestyle-centric planning. And you are essentially giving yourself a big mental picture about, I want to have this kind of life in the future. I want to be able to log on to work whenever I want, or I want to be able to log on to work only in the afternoons and evenings, because that is when I work best. I want to have my mornings and afternoons to do my own personal passion projects, to spend time with family, friends, or maybe it's the inverse, or maybe you want to work on only Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you want to in office, and then you want to work from home Tuesday, Thursday. But then it's getting even more granular. It's like, how far do I want to commute to work if I have to commute to work? Do I want to have a only remote job, or do I want to find a fully hybrid job? Do I want to live in a city? Do I want to live in a town or in a small town? Okay, if I want to live in a small town, what needs to be within a reasonable driving distance? And what would a random Tuesday look like in my life? Would I be logging into work? Would I then be driving to get coffee before? So do I need to be within distance of a coffee shop? And I understand, though, that this seems like a lot, because at points it can be. However, that is the whole reason we need to get clarity, because this again goes to that adjusting. Every time there's a redefining moment in your life, you adjust course a little bit, because the clarity piece is all about that long-term thinking. So when life gets redefined for us, we are in a present moment. We are now in the midst of change. When we're trying to gain clarity, that is, how are we going to take this change and use it to move ourselves towards that next goal, towards that next step that allows us to, again, reach that deep life in the future. And as we gain clarity, of course, there's going to be missteps, or of course, there's going to be moments that don't make the most sense. So gaining clarity also comes with the learning curve. And yes, that is the name of one of my segments for the podcast in general, but it is also relevant here. So when I say the learning curve, that is us trying to figure out, again, by trial and error sometimes, how are we going to get to that long-term vision? So we have to be okay with backtracking at times. We have to be okay with understanding that we're not going to get it just right, but it is a slow and steady process of building up the right tools, building up the right resources, building up the right experiences that allow us to redirect every so often to get closer and closer. So that is where, again, clarity comes into play here. So let's move this one. So we've gained clarity. So we've gone from redefining to gaining clarity. And now the next piece of the puzzle here, if my thing cooperates, there we go. The next piece of the puzzle is called making the plan. Again, very straightforward, but also exceedingly relevant. So in this inverse pyramid so far, we have gone through redefining. We've gone through clarity. Now that we have some clarity, we need to make the plan. Now, of course, the plan is not always the most exciting part of the puzzle here, and sometimes, honestly, it can be the piece that gives us the most anxiety because we will end up thinking the path we want to go can be either more complicated or difficult than we think it is, or we just don't know how to start. And those factors themselves can be the whole reason that some people never actually sit down and plan out their long-term goals and their long-term vision for the life they want to lead, the life that is meaningful to them. And this is where, as I've said at the start of this podcast, this is the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. We want to take these complicated questions and boil them down into simple, actionable tips. And that works very well for making a plan, because making a plan is complicated. But with enough time, effort, brain power, and intention, you're able to boil it down to its most simple roots. And so I kind of use this as the framing structure for things like health, career, finances, relationships, and personal development. Kind of just like 5 main categories that if you're able to dial these in pretty well, you're going to have a life that is going to put you in like the top 10% of people, because it's intentional, it's well built, and you are moving in a direction that is hopefully up and to the right, because you're getting healthier and better as the years go on. So, making the plan. Let me type that out here. So, health, relationships, career, finances, self-improvement. So with these, this is, of course, related to then goal setting, because you're trying to define what makes the most sense to us. So I brought it with me, so if you can see it in the back of this new channel, or not this new channel, but my new setup, because I have moved, I brought my goal sheet with me, and that is based off of these principles. So my health, my relationships, my finances, and personal goals. I've kind of boiled it down to those 4, but they are built around these multiple little categories of making the plan. But you want to have a concrete goal and reason behind each one. And again, these are long term. So for health, if me and my wife want to be parents in the next 5-10 years here, I want to make sure that no matter what, I am able to walk with my kids, I'm able to play with my kids, I'm able to pick them up, because I know that's something that some adults and parents have listed as a struggle point, is as they get older and as their health kind of declines, or as they don't take enough care of it, they have trouble playing with the kids. I want to lead a lifestyle that encourages them, and then also encourages my wife and I, because I want to have as many years as possible with her. And that is the health long-term thinking. And that will be broken down into smaller actionable goals. But as we go through it, then it's the same thing with relationships. I want to make sure that I still have deep and meaningful friendships that I'm able to lean on, because the loneliness endemic is a thing. We are more connected and more isolated than ever in the world, and that can make it hard to maintain good relationships that we know we need. And not only that, if I remember correctly, it was the longest running study on happiness. They have found that the key defining factor into a good long life is having good, healthy relationships. And that is friends, that is family, but ultimately it's just having these multiple long-standing, meaningful relationships that contribute to a long, happy, healthy life. And that needs to be factored into making the plan. And of course, career, finances, self-improvement. You should always be working to grow and discover and learn new things. But when you're making the plan, it's taking into account these main categories. You can redefine them, you can shuffle them around, add in a couple more if you have different circumstances that you need to keep an eye on. But the important part here is that you are trying to build solid foundational pillars to the things that matter in your life and that are going to get you to where you want to go in life. And from making the plan, we break it up into a couple of categories. So these are the pillars, but now the pillars have categories themselves. And this is why I chose to draw with this one, because there is a lot of little things that come into play here. So this shrinks down a little bit, adds room for the next three categories, which are going to be three separate boxes. So let's get these inputted right here. And if you've been noticing my fantastic drawings, then you'll see that I have made an inverse pyramid. Working up from redefining to clarity, making the plan, and now the final three boxes. So what are the final three boxes, you might ask? And if you are used to Cal Newport's work and the deep life and lifestyle-centric planning, then you probably know where I'm going with this. We have the long-term plans, or the long-term actionables. We have medium term. And then we have short term / daily. Now, within these are the ways you want to think about making your actionable steps, because these factors all play into each other. Redefining moments cause you to pause and re-examine your life. When you gain clarity about where you want to go in life and that you are working towards a bigger goal and working towards a certain lifestyle, then at that point you are making a plan that is focused on the solid foundational pillars of your life. And you need to have actionable steps that you will take in the long term, medium term, and short term or daily that will get you closer and closer to it. Because we are the sum of our habits, we are the sum of our experiences, and if we don't dial those in, we're not going to be able to reach the goals that we want. So with this, I'm going to add in some kind of rough timeline. So when I say long term, medium term, and short term, I probably imagine for a lot of us that means something different. That means, for someone long term might be just 2 years out. It might be even just a year out because they are in a rough season of life. For other people, medium term means 3 years. And for some people, short term is because they are well situated, and short term might be, okay, I have the next year and a half. But I'm redefining it as short term / daily because that just means, again, being built up by our habits and what we want to do. That is foundational to crafting the right plan and make sure that we're taking the right steps towards it. So let's jump back into the visual here. So I phrase long term as 5 to 10 years. Because there's a lot of things in life that operate in cycles, and more likely than not, your life is going to operate in I prefer to call them seasons. But you're going to have seasons of learning, seasons of earning, and seasons of growth. And I stole that one from Sean Purry of the My First Million podcast because I loved that framing where we know that something is always going to come around the corner and we can learn from it, we can earn from it, we can grow from it, and it will happen in just different timelines. But on average, 5-10 years, that's also a good timeline to kind of shake things up in your life. But that's the long-term thinking. What is the lifestyle that you want, that you are aiming for in 5 to 10 years? The medium term then becomes 1 to 3 years. But not only that, you are then thinking a little bit more in quarters. So 3-month blocks. Because there is the saying that people overestimate what they can get done in 1 year, but then we underestimate what we can get done in 3 to 5 years. And so that becomes the medium term because we are giving ourselves a bit more time, but still working in a time frame that makes it feel like, okay, we're going to see a couple more results within a shorter amount of time, but still building up and compounding towards that long-term goal. And the quarters there kind of help break it up further to allow us to think of what is the season and thing I need to focus on here. So I'll use health and finances as a simple or 2 pillars to adjust, because say in the first quarter of 2025, you want to focus on health. You want to get health dialed in, or at least to 80% of the way there, where you know you'd be able to maintain it and make good changes. So what would end up happening here is that during the first quarter, you are focusing on diet, you're focusing on exercise, you're focusing on flexibility, you're focusing on sustainability, because you don't want this to be just a fad that you go through from one quarter and then your weight balloons back up in the second quarter, but you're making it part of your lifestyle. But then after that, that might be then when you move on to finances within the second quarter, where you are figuring out budgeting, you're figuring out investing, you're figuring out retirement accounts, you're figuring out what the rich life, that's stolen from Ramit Sethi and the I Would Teach You to Be Rich book and series. And you're asking yourself, well, what does my rich life look like? And how can that play into the long-term goals and the long-term vision and lifestyle I have for myself? And then you can use any of the other pillars as, Q3, Q4. Maybe the next one is relationships, making more time to have a sustainable change to your relationships. And then self-improvement. Maybe it is, hey, I have got my finances under control. I've gotten my health a bit more in control. I want to kind of broaden my horizons and understandings. Maybe I want to go back to school. Maybe I want to get a certification, whatever it is. But it's breaking up the goals and the pillars into quarters and just chunking them out, so that way it is all, again, compounding and building up towards the long-term perspective and lifestyle that you're aiming for. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is the short-term and daily steps. So the daily routine, the daily task. So we are built up by our habits, and we are the sum of our habits. So the daily routine then becomes super important, because we're asking ourselves, well, what am I doing first thing in the morning? Am I waking up, checking my phone before I go to work, and then spending a good half hour just scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on TikTok, watching YouTube videos before I actually then get out of bed and get the day started? Or am I getting out of bed? Am I stretching, waking myself up? Am I getting my first sip of water, sitting down and journaling for 5-10 minutes? And then from there, am I going to do a quick workout? Am I going to read a little bit? Am I going to do these other tasks that are going to push me in the direction that I want to go? Because all of these should compound off one another. So essentially what happened is if you are going from the short-term daily routines and the daily task, these tasks should be complementing the quarterly and 1 to 2 year goals that you are setting for yourself. Again, if we want to use the fitness of 2025 and quarter 1, so that would be January, February, March, then what you'd end up doing is thinking, okay, I need to make this daily routine include a certain daily task. So that's going to be, say, a 30 to 45-minute weight training workout, something that's sustainable, and then it might be 3 to 4 days a week. So that way it's not becoming your entire life, but is again focused on sustainability and a lifestyle adjustment. And then as you continue to work on that style of thinking, so the daily routine, the daily task, into the quarters, into the 1 to 2 year time frame or 1 to 3 year time frames, then that compounds into your long term. Because if you are lifting weights, if you are eating right over 5-10 years, you're going to be in a much healthier position than you would be if you started later on or if you never started at all. And that is common sense, but it's hard. That is the important piece about all this, is that it might sound simple and it might be simple in concept, but it is difficult in practice because life happens and things don't always go according to plan. There is this fun phrase this fun line from The Flash on the CW when that was running, where Captain Snow, one of the villains of the show, told the Flash that you want to make the plan, execute the plan, expect the plan to go off the rails, and then throw away the plan. Now, we're not going to throw away the plan, but we do have to adjust. And that is actually the final piece of this puzzle here. And that is just adjusting in different departments as needed. So we're not always going to have everything on 100% dialed in, because you can't be perfect about this. And you also can't expect yourself to get it 100% right. As you go through the seasons of life that are going to come your way no matter what, you might realize that I want to have a different type of lifestyle, or I thought this was going to be important to me, but I've realized it's not. I'm going to cut this piece of the lifestyle plan out. And that is okay. In fact, that is encouraged, because in one of the books that I have loved to read, which is the vocational calling, is that there's this idea of way closing. There's this idea that you can go in a certain direction and a path or an opportunity might close behind you. But that's actually a good thing, because that becomes a guiding marker on where you're going to go next, where you want to go next. And you might realize, okay, maybe my career as an accountant wasn't what I wanted to do. Accountants are just such an easy example. So many people use them. To any accountants out there, I know a couple of them. Y'all are fine. It's an easy example. But someone's might realize, okay, I went to college for this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't find this fun. I don't find this enjoyable. I don't find the work meaningful to my life. I want to make a career change. So then you can use that as an indicator. It might be, maybe it's that certain category of accountant you're in. Maybe it is you're not working with the right clientele, or maybe you truly just need to find a new career path. All these things can happen. They're not uncommon. It's not unexpected at times. But the important part here is that you have used way closing to adjust your lifestyle plan. And then you go through and you work backwards. So you have that long-term vision. Then you adjust your medium-term goals. And then you fix and correct your short-term daily routine and the daily task. So that way it all works together and flows back into that long-term vision. And yeah, it might not feel like it is really doing much. Like for me, waking up early, going to the gym, and working on YouTube and podcasting for a couple hours in my morning before I go to my 9 to 5 doesn't feel like I'm making a whole lot of progress in the short term here. But these are the things that are going to compound and grow and help me get to where I want my future to be, where I want my future lifestyle to be, my future deep life. So that then becomes our lifestyle pyramid, where we have gone from redefining, so a life event that redefines where we're going, to gaining clarity, where we plan our next move and we go through a learning curve of how we're going to make it work. We go to making the plan, where we support the pillars of our lives, so health, relationships, career, finances, self-improvement, whatever other ones are important to you. And then we move into long-term, medium-term, and short-term actionables. What are the actions we are going to take that are going to compound on each other and get us where we need to go in the long run? But let me know on YouTube. So comment down below, what is the piece of this lifestyle planning that you would change or that you would adjust because maybe it doesn't quite fit for you, or maybe you realize that it's missing a key component. So let me know your thoughts on that down below. And I encourage you guys to go through this task or this thought process a couple times a year. Because if you are thinking in the long term, a couple times a year is going to be likely all you're going to need to make the right adjustments. If you are revisiting this and you haven't broken up your short-term daily task into things like weekly and monthly, then you might be missing out on some of the compounding effects and experiences that you're going to get. But it's all about starting off simple first, because if you're able to just think about it in these terms of my short-term daily task and my daily actions and routines are going to help me in the next year, and then in the next 5 to 10 years, I will be in a much different spot. That is the simplified version of lifestyle-centric planning that I am stealing from Cal Newport, and I will probably come up with my own term for that at some point, because I want to simplify this down further and make it so that way it becomes an easier thought process to go through, because it can be overwhelming to, again, think about your perfect life. It can be overwhelming to think about what is the ideal lifestyle for myself, the ideal day. What does my future day look like? But I want to encourage you guys to think through this. Don't let the overwhelm get to you, and instead focus on how can I go through the steps of this pyramid and make it meaningful, make my life feel meaningful to me. Because all this is going to be a personal journey and personal story for you guys. And so I encourage you to think through it frequently, but also at the same time, don't let it be all consuming. Because if you do the steps and you work through them, trust the process, because you will essentially change the lifestyle you have over time. So with that, again, comment down below, what would you change about this? What would you add to this? And have an amazing day, you amazing people. I will see you all in the next episode. Make sure to go out there and do great things. I'll see you all next time.